Welcome to the DataStack Show. Each week, we explore the world of data by talking to the people shaping its future. You'll learn about new data technology and trends and how data teams and processes are run at top companies. The DataStack Show is brought to you by RudderStack, the CDP for developers. You can learn more at RudderStack.com. First of all, Kostas and Brooks, it's nice to have you back. I was flying blind there for a little bit on the last episode, but the team is back together. And today we are going to talk with Gabriel from Carto, who's here at Data Council on site. And Kostas, I'm just excited. I don't know if I have an individual burning question other than I just want to learn about the world of location data. This is the first guest we've had on the podcast from a company that's dealing with data of this sort. And so I just have tons of questions. How is this world different? How is this world the same? And so I'm just excited to learn. How about you?
Yeah, I have some technical questions. Traditionally, I mean, the algorithms and like the way that you approach and you query geographical or spatial data is a little bit different, and usually database systems need like, let's say like some extensions on the SQL language itself, and like also like on how they represent and how they store the data to do that. So it's very, I want like to understand a little bit better how Carto complements the data warehouse solutions and their capabilities for querying this data out there and how they work together. So that's definitely something that I want to explore in this conversation.
All right, well, let's dig in and talk with Gabriel.
Let's do it.
Gabriel, welcome to the DataStack Show. We are so excited to talk with you about Carto and learn more about you. So how did you get into data originally?
So originally, actually, I was abroad in Peace Corps, and I was working on just collecting any data I could in the place I was stationed. And this meant like looking at cars on the side of a street and just through this trying to figure out just collecting a spreadsheet. And then getting into more into open source community, because that's what it's for. It's to kind of get people that don't have all these tools and all these web apps to like just get the bare minimum to just get what they need to do. And from there, that's when I started to learn to code, and I started to really try to get more into this like understanding how to get data, how to make it better, what can I build with it to like empower people or make things better.
Yeah, very cool. And just out of curiosity, what were you looking at cars for, counting cars for? What was the use case in the Peace Corps?
Yeah, so before this, I was actually an urban planner, and I was stationed as an urban planner in Albania. And there, we were trying to figure out what roads need to improve. And to do that, you need data to be like, how many cars are navigating through this road, and to get more like an analysis on this. I think it was funny because everyone knows which roads get most traveled. Like it's pretty, we're a small town, everyone knows, but then I'm just like, let's just check. Why don't we just check to make sure? And it was actually really interesting there, like, oh wow, we didn't know this road gets used this much. Like they started to get more like understanding, like, oh, like we should start keeping track of this. And and like I helped them out to get them more into that kind of thinking.
Very cool. Okay, and so you got more into data after that, and then did you start working in data? Like, did you go to work for a SaaS company, or like, how did you sort of?
I think funny enough, so I do have like a very variations of career, just because I think for me it's more about what I want to learn and more what I want to do. So after I came back to New York, the Uber crisis was happening in New York, where a lot of taxi drivers were losing a lot of fares, and so I saw that problem and I'm like, oh, that's super interesting. Like what's going on here? And then I put those data analytic tools to that. And then I got hired at the Taxi Limousine Commission as a policy analyst there. And I helped them to build up their data team and to get more of understanding of that. So I guess for me, it's less on the, like what I'm, like it's more about what's happening. And then I really try to help and try to solve that problem in some way or part of it.
Yeah, fascinating. I love that. It's almost like this may be the wrong term, but almost like an activist approach to like, solving problems with data, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. But just to bring it back to originally how I got into Carto is, I think, so I was working for an app mobility company called CityMapper, and there I became more of like project manager, more like for all these analysts, and I realized I was missing out on the technical aspect of things. I realized also that I want to work more with city-orientated instead of just mobility. I was becoming a mobility specialist. And so I wanted to expand that and get more technical at the same time. So that's why I think I always knew about Carto. Like in New York City, Carto is a very known product and a lot of people know about it. I've been to their events. And so I've always had an interest in Carto. And actually, I found out that they're hiring was through, I was actually looking for something for CityMapper for my analyst. And I'm like, oh, why don't we just try out Carto? And I'm like, oh, they're hiring too. Why don't I just try it out? And here I am.
Very cool. Okay, so for our listeners who don't know what Carto is, what is it?
So I would say at our core, we try to help you handle spatial data. And why I want to keep it this broad is because we provide a UI that can quickly create a map. Like with one click button, upload data, create a map, style it in real time. But on the other side of things, we create our own spatial functions that you're able to like do advanced analytics using spatial data as well. And on top of that, we even provide a backend that you can connect to your cloud warehouses because we are cloud warehouse native, that you can connect it and then build your own apps on top of it, like React, Angular. So I think it's less about these products, it's more about we deal with spatial data and we try to get the most and what do you need from it, and we try to build those tools around that goal.
Fascinating. Okay, so I'll hand it to Kostas. One more question. When we were just chatting before we hit record, I said location data. And, which I think about maps, right? And you just kind of think about location data. And you corrected me, which I found very helpful. And you said, well, it's like location data, sure, but it's really spatial data. Help us understand what the difference between location data and spatial data is.
I think location data is closely linked with data itself, like going from A to B. But when you look, like that is a type of spatial data.
Like coordinates.
Exactly. I think people link with that. But I think spatial data is more like contours as well. Like you have polygons, you have radiuses, and within these radiuses, like how they interact with each other as well, which is also another field of data analytics as well. So for example, if you have like a polygon of a country and you want to see if there's a volcano going and you want to see who is affected by this and how many people are affected by this, and you get an influence area of around, we see the lava going in, because it's actually an example we've done before. It's actually La Palma example. And then you're able to see what buildings are the most affected or could possibly be affected by this.
Interesting.
So it's less, like when you look at that buffer, it's not a location, it's a space. And
interesting, right. So it's adding dimension as opposed to sort of just like to lat longe, right?
Exactly.
Which is basically a line. Fascinating. Okay, Kostas, I could keep going, but
So my first question is about, we keep hearing the past couple of years a lot about like time series data, right? So we have like time series data and we have time series databases. So we have specialized technology actually like to work with this dimension, which is the time dimension. Why we don't also hear the same for spatial data? Or there are technologies out there and we just don't know about it. But why do you think that there's so much more, let's say, interest in the time instead of like the space? Is it because like it's harder like to work with that? Is that the use cases are not there yet? Like, what's your feeling about that?
I think for time, I would say it's not really that it's hard. It's just there's more variance. Mm-hmm. So I think there's still a discussion timestamp versus daytime. And these conversions are like, and you lose a lot of data, which like with how do I say it? Like daylight savings, like all these factors have been taken into account, and all these data warehouses are trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
So on our side of things, it's more we worry about the spatial side of this, and just to say like I wouldn't completely agree. I would disagree a bit that it's not connected, because I think in mobility data that is essential. Like time and space is like that's like the bloodline of that those data sets. So I think it's more on the I think what most people are focusing at the moment, and I think you are right. Time series is not really the thing, because I think usually it deals with real-time data, right? It's like you get a point and you want to know this is it happening this day versus it happens instantly. So with these types of things, it's less data analytics, I want to say. It's more about like an app that you're going to be using in real time. And that's why I don't think it's gone that focused, because it's more app mobility, more function related versus like if you're at a company, like that's, you don't need that much of like the time recording for that.
Yeah, 100%. And how do you feel about, let's say, the support that the modern data management systems have for spatial data? Like the data warehouses, for example. Like, do you see that there are things that are missing there in terms of capabilities? Is there work to be done? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think, and we have partners with all of them, or we have great partners there at each of these cloud data warehouses, Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, Databricks, and they're doing a great job with like the scaling. Like this is a problem that everyone has, and they're doing a great job about it. And I think in that side of things, like we don't expect them to handle the geom part of this. Like that's not their focus. And I think this is where Carto fits into this, where we're able to like bring that spatial function to their data warehouses. Like we actually have what we call the Carto Analytic Toolbox, where you can actually upload all these spatial functions, all these models into that warehouse, and you can actually run these functions within them. So we're that layer that they're missing for that. And so again, we want them to keep using their products, but we want to be the spatial go-to for them to rely on.
How does this work? Like, let's say I'm a user of Snowflake, right? And at some point I want to add like spatial capabilities to my instance. Do I have like to copy the data to your system and do the analytics and then go back, or like how is the product works? Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So there's two ways to do it. So I'll start with the Carto Analytic Toolbox first. That one is once you're an account member, you actually contact us, and then we actually send you something to install within Snowflake, and they'll have it installed on there. And we have a whole our documentation shows how to install that really quickly. All our customers have really been really great about doing it, and they've been really vocal. They've been wanting to get those functions as soon as possible. Whenever we release them, they're like, send it over to us as soon as possible. Like we really depend on this.
Early access.
Yeah, because it just makes their lives so much easier, because we've had people, like I think Snowflake is an example of this, that what you've said before, like they've installed it in Snowflake, then they bring it out of it, do spatial functions there, and then bring it back in.
Yeah.
Or we had a case where actually a user just had like a notebook of like different SQL functions to do like very simple spatial. And we cut that down to just like very simple functions. Like I think buffer is a good example of this, where if anyone that's done a buffer, the distance is like insane to do for like kilometers or specific meters. And so for us, we just made it into a simple like kilometer. You can use meter and just put the number, and that's it, like how it should work. But SQL isn't that straightforward. On the other side of things, to also connect to Snowflake, it's as easy as making a connection. So we're actually interacting with these data warehouses, and whenever you upload a data, we're actually putting a SQL query within there. So you can actually, it's like running SQL within your own data warehouse, but within Carto. And so, again, we say like there is no limitation because it's your data warehouse. We're not dealing with it, but we're empowering it, and you can use it under our platform that helps you enable it more. Like you're able to like import data straight into your your cloud data warehouse. Like that's like a way that we like are trying to be as we're trying to improve these services as much as we can to our users.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And do you see, are there differences between like the different data warehouse solutions out there? Like, is there like things that you can do on Snowflake that you cannot do like on BigQuery, for example, or like Redshift? Like how are the different data warehouses feel like?
And this is why we are partners with them, that we're trying to make that there is no difference between them.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can do whatever you do in Snowflake, you can do in Databricks. And that's why we partner with them to make sure that, of course they have different systems, how they work, but that's our job to figure that out and make it as seamless as possible. So when you go into in Carto, you just see your connections and you can use the same functions throughout. So it's that seamless.
Question for me, and I think some of our listeners, When you say spatial functions, could you give a specific example of that? Like, I think I know what that means, but like, for those of us who aren't as familiar with sort of spatial data, like give an example of a spatial function.
Like I think the buffer one is a good example of this, or an intersection. So if you have a bunch of points on a map, and then you have a polygon, then you want to be able to like get whatever points are within that polygon, or actually remove the points, right? Like you want to be able to like quickly get these points that are in certain polygons or not, or in by certain values, or you actually want to run like a model regression where you kind of are figuring out like, hey, there's a point, and using math, which we can't not really get into right now because that gets really dense, but you're able to see, it gets influenced by the polygons around it, and in what categories there's like a pattern to this. And so then we create geomes based on this, on the data set you give it. So it can get really deep to that sense too, as getting a point outside or inside a polygon.
Got it.
These are the functions.
Yeah, super interesting. Super interesting. Okay, and how does Carto execute those functions? Those are SQL in the warehouse.
Yes, and they also call upon our own data warehouse, because again, like we have our own, we are trying to be as cloud native as possible. We use the same thing, so you call upon our own cloud data warehouses where these functions exist. So you're calling to us too when you're running it.
Yeah, makes total sense. Sorry, Kostas, I had to interrupt.
No. Those were like some great questions there. And who's the user? Like, who is like the people that and the roles that you see like using Carto today?
So I would say like they're into really extreme cases. So I want to say in the one user, they just want to create a map. Like when they have their data set, and they just want to quickly create a map that enables them to just see their points on the map and to share with their users. To that sense, it's literally we have a one-click button, create map, and then style it, and then be able to do these like advanced analytics, but they just click buttons and do a UI. On the other side of things, we have very, very technical users that have servers, they understand, they build their own front-end apps, and in that case, we actually help them, or we empower them to use Carto in the way that best fits them. And so I think it's similar how Carto is actually shaped. We actually have a group that is very highly more about what does the customer want, and on their side of things, we have very highly technical people that actually help build that out. So I think our customer base is kind of in the similar sense, where we're very highly technically, and then also on the other side, like try to make it as easy as possible. Yeah,
makes sense. And like, can you give us like a couple of like typical use cases that you see out there? Like, I mean, I get, let's say in a way that someone needs to build a map at some point, right? But why? What are like do you see that like in commerce like happening more? Is like, what are some examples of like incorporating Carto inside like either an application or an analytics use case?
Yeah, so for example, for internal uses in a company, you want to see like what stores are, for example, performing the best. And so then you're able to like layer data inside of it. Maybe these stores are too close together, you find out. Like you're able to like make a buffer of like, and use some routing information to be like, like people walking around this area, this is the general sense of from this store to here. This is they can walk 10 minutes walking. So then you get an idea of like, okay, like only these people around here care about the store.
And is that how you would define the buffer, like as a term? Is it like there's a 10-minute walking buffer around like the point?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So in that sense, like if they interlock, they overlap each other, these 10-minute walk, you're like, maybe these stores are too far apart from each other. As an example of like a use case in like more of the side of like just creating a map or for internal use. On the other side of things, these are more technical people, is that they have their internal systems, like they have these giant servers, they have all these data in cloud warehouses that are like trillions of rows. Then they just need someone to be able to like create or make apps for them really easily. So they just need something that, they also have security as well. So we can like have a self-host, we call it, where we have a tenant, and they can have their information in their own servers if they want, but we just have Carto as kind of like a front end for it. and then we do it. So in that way, it's kind of like another app in their system that they can use internally. And that's another use case they can do.
Cool. And okay, last question from me.
Yeah, nice.
I don't believe you.
Yeah, I have to. Tell us something like exciting that is coming in the near future for Carto, something that you are very happy.
Yeah, no, actually, I think I came at a very, very lucky time in Carto, to be honest with you. Like, this wasn't planned, and I just like Carto overall, but it's this, so we're actually transferring over to a new platform. This whole cloud nativity is actually very new. Like, we've been trying to build this platform for a while, and it's completely a new accounts, new everything. We're transferring people over, and we're building out a new platform, and that's super exciting. Like, our current platform is great, but we see the trends that are going on and people going to data warehouses. We see this, people wanting more control over their data, and so we want to help enable that. And so with a new platform, you get a bunch of we're creating features that we've always wanted. Like, I think one of them we call a lasso tool that in the old Carto, you're able to zoom in to be able to see them, but people wanted to be able to like select a certain area, only this area, instead of having to zoom in and just figuring it out from there. And now we can just do that. Like, there's so much new features coming, and where it's not just like, oh, we're just waiting to make it catch up to it. It's like, no, we're not. We're like, no, this platform is going to be a lot better than the other one. And so that's super exciting to see that change, and like why we prioritize, and all the new features that come out that haven't existed before.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
So, question, do you have customers who basically white label maps through Carto and serve those to their users?
So yes, we do. And there's like, I guess white labeling would be like a way, I need to explain that a little more. Like, it's more about like, we have password protections for like a certain map. So when you create a map, you can make it completely publicly available, or you can put it behind a password. So if you want someone to see it, or you can like actually take the map and make it into an iframe to put it on your website.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of a way. Or again, like I think in more like people can have their own Carto, and like they can just have it internally, and they can actually decide how to share this map.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, because it sounds like it's less of a, like, okay, I'm going to start a consumer mobile app, and like there's a mapping component to it, so I need like, sort of this interactive map, right? It sounds much more geared towards using like specific data to create specific maps, or like solve really specific questions related to spatial data, like inside of companies.
Yeah, exactly. In some cases, yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. And how long has the company been around?
I'm not really sure about that, to be honest with you. I want to say like 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. And we didn't even, I dropped the ball. I didn't ask you this at the beginning, but what do you do at Carto? I'm so sorry, Gabriel.
No problem. So I'm a support engineer at Carto. This has a very unique, because I know when people hear support engineer, it's like a very broad term, like solutions engineer. Yeah. So it really depends on the company. I think the idea of support within Carto is actually support within the company. Like we are a full stack team. We work on front end, back end, servers, everything possible to make the app run and improve it. But also we support users, like very technical users to not so technical users, to just get the most out of the platform. And we actually have the same system internally, like within our team, people come with us with questions, the same system we use for our customers, because we want to like have this whole system to make sure that we're providing the same quality we're getting and the customers are getting.
Oh,
which
interesting.
Is really a model.
Okay, so you treat sort of internal customers the same way that you treat external customers.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That is super interesting.
And a very high technical team, which is also very interesting.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure that makes your job super interesting. Okay, I'd love to know, especially because you really have approached a lot of things, it sounds like, in your career from like observing like an interesting like problem or an interesting opportunity, what are maybe one or two of the coolest things you've seen your customers do with Carto, or like the coolest problems that they've solved with Carto?
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things for me is more utility. Like I've seen people make a huge impact on people's lives. Like I've seen, like actually the simplest maps actually are the most interesting to me because the data coming in and the impact it has, like I think like elections, like voting view, like you.
Yeah.
So I think those are really interesting because they see more the impact of the data set itself. On the technical side, actually, funny enough, it's how people use the product. Like you see some people that are using the UI in such an interesting way. Like we had one where you zoom in and you're able to see like the congestion number within the road, and you zoom out, they would have a different one. We're like, why would you want this? And then they're like explaining to us that like, hey, it's because at this zoom level, you see this part of the area, and on this zoomer, you see this part. So we want to make that distinction. And this is how we're like, and we're like, oh, that's like, it wasn't, well, if you're using it this way, then it's meant for that. But we've never thought of using it that way before. So those are like to be honest with you, I think most of the really interesting like features we think about are actually through customer, because they just want the solution. And then they explain it to us, and we're like, oh, okay, like this is why this makes sense, and that makes total, and we should actually add that.
Yeah, totally, super interesting. Well, Gabriel, this has been such an interesting show. I learned so much about spatial data, not location data. Well, some about location data that I didn't know before. So thanks for taking some time out to chat with us, and best of luck on your journey as you help people solve spatial data problems.
No, thank you so much for the conversation. It was great.